So hey Company 008, it's Xiant again, and here we're playing some Crysis 3. And I want to apologize to start out with, and this is a loss. We do lose, and I was playing against a guy last night, and he was better than I was, and I'm not bad at this game, not bad at all. But this guy was an absolute monster. But this particular game, my teammates were, let us say, less than intelligent. And I went around and lost. However, I'm using this footage because I go on an absolute massacre with the Max Nanosuit. And it's a little silly how many kills I managed to get with auto armor and Max Nanosuit, just meleeing people in their faces. But that's not, of course, the topic of today's commentary. Instead, I want to talk about nuance in gaming. Specifically shooters. What about a shooter gives it the power to be new? Because every shooter essentially boils down to, you have a gun, your enemies have a gun, your allies have guns. Go shoot each other. And with a game like Call of Duty 2, and I won't just talk about Call of Duty, that's all it was. People with guns, in a map, shooting each other. But what about a game like Crysis 3, or Battlefield 3, or Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare 2? What about these games gives them the power to go beyond just people shooting each other in a map? And if we're going to talk specifically about Crysis 3, it's the armor abilities. And while that seems obvious, there's a lot of little things you have to take into account. For one thing, there's Cloak. And Cloak is less used in Crysis 3 than it was in Crysis 2, I find. Mostly because the developers decided that they didn't want Cloak to be quite as powerful. And so you can see Cloak from a very good distance away. But it's armor, for me at least, that gives Crysis 2 its real staying power. Because in Battlefield 3 or Call of Duty, the guns kill pretty quickly. You have 4 to 6 bullets, and your enemies should, barring bad hit detection, they should die. But in Crysis 3, unless your enemy is a complete and total moron, and/or he's not wearing auto armor, he'll put up his armor and jump and do all of these different funny things with his suit abilities. And then you'll have a tough time killing him for whatever reason. And the 4 to 6 bullets you would have had to spend had he not put armor on are instead up to 10 bullets. Or 12 bullets, or your entire clip if your shot's particularly bad. And you'll see in this gameplay my shot can be less than stellar at times. But armor seems like such a small thing. Okay, so I'm putting 6 more bullets into somebody. Great, that's fine. But what really sets Crysis 3 apart for me is the fact that the game still moves at a lightning pace, even when it takes so long to kill someone. And of course, you have the fact that a lot of the guns have really large clips, magazines if you're one of those gun nuts. But the game moves really quickly because A, the guns shoot quickly, B, there's a ton of people in the game at one time, and C, you have all these kill streaks going on, and there's not so many that it's overdone, but there's still a lot going on at one time. Plus the fact the maps are small for the amount of players usually in a server. And so, again, even though it takes a lot of bullets to kill someone, you're spending a lot of your time thinking, where's my next fight gonna happen? And usually it's within about 5 seconds. And if you're not reloaded, you're probably not gonna have enough bullets to take your enemy down. And then, of course, there's Cloak, which I've touched on a little bit, which for me is more a long-range evasion tool. Or just an evasion tool in general. You want, essentially, to use it to break line of sight and get away. Now, nanovision is much more effective in this game than it was in Crysis 2, but I haven't seen many people using it, in all honesty, which is strange considering how effective it is. Now, of course, if you're in Max Nanosuit, they're not going to be able to kill you no matter what you're doing, and you're going to go on a tear. But because you can see Cloak from a pretty fair distance away, there's not really a use for it in the close quarters of an objective game mode like Crash Shot or Spears / Domination. But in a game mode like TDM, where it's sometimes good to camp in a corner if you have to reload, or if you have to collect a tag, it's always generally a good idea to go into Cloak and make sure that everyone is not going to see you. But because I know a lot of you come from Culprit, or my channel, or Dell's channel, or Urtzi's channel, and we're primarily Battlefield commentators. I know I've done some Call of Duty as well. What about Battlefield added the nuance required to give that game its staying power? And the answer is twofold. First, and most obviously, are the vehicles. In Battlefield, vehicle play is some of the most important play you can have. And that's where I think Battlefield 3 made a mistake, is that they put less emphasis on vehicles and more on the infantry. Even in Bad Company 2, which was primarily an infantry shooter, the vehicles were still very powerful. But they were simple to take care of. A couple of C4 sticks for a light tank, one or two for a smaller vehicle, and of course you didn't have any jets. But then in Battlefield 3, you have one of two game modes. You either have the vehicle game modes like Conquest Large and the Big Rush maps, or infantry like Grand Bazaar and Operation Metro. And Battlefield 3, because Bad Company 2 had such shoddy hit detection, it took a lot of bullets to kill someone, much as it does in Crysis. And Crysis's claim to fame is that you really have to think about your armor abilities. And if you think about when do I armor, when do I cloak, when do I use nanovision, when do I throw a pipe at somebody. But in Battlefield 3, if it's just infantry and the hit detection is marginally better, people are going to die pretty quick, and it becomes a really generic shooter. So you want to find that really nice balance between vehicle gameplay and infantry gameplay. And maps like the car camp maps are really what capture that. Because there's one or two vehicles per side at any one time, and so some of the team needs to focus on the vehicles, some of the team needs to focus on the infantry, and some of the team needs to focus on the objective. There's always a really nice balance. But when you have a map like Operation Metro, or even Grand Bazaar, where there are technically vehicles, it's still really infantry heavy. And it's just who can hold down what and for how long. And the balance that you have to strike starts to break down. Battlefield's claim to fame is they stress their vehicle play, that we have this really intense vehicle gameplay that we really want you to start playing. But then they put in maps that don't really focus on the vehicles, that focus on the infantry, and people don't really care for the infantry gameplay in Battlefield sometimes. All they want to do is fly around in a jet, or an AC-130, or go around in an Abrams and hit people with giant shells. And then you have a game like Call of Duty, which is at its core really just an arcade shooter. But the nuance there is, of course, and this is obvious, but the reasons are quite key, is the kill streaks. Like I said, Call of Duty is a very standard shooter. It's a map and a bunch of people with guns, and you're shooting each other. Yes, there are occasionally objectives, yes, there are occasionally things to do other than kill people, but for the most part, it's a bunch of people shooting each other. But it's the kill streaks. The kill streaks create something that Xbox Ahoy often talks about, the metagame. What do you want to do to make the game fresh? Well, you don't put on UAV, counter UAV, lightning strike. Instead, you put on counter UAV, swarm, and VSAT. You try to go for something that you don't normally go for. You give the game something new to do. You give the game a different feel than it would have had otherwise. And that's really what Nuance is all about. It's the ability of a game to feel new even when it's not doing anything particularly different. Because small changes like poor hit detection or an armor mode are all that it takes to slow the game down just enough that it's not completely frenetic. Bad Company 2 worked because the gunplay was exactly the same, well, sort of the same as Battlefield 3's is, but the hit detection was so bad that it took a lot of bullets to kill someone, and so the game, while fast, especially in close quarters, was slow enough that the game was tolerable and it was fun. In Call of Duty, the ability to customize your kill streaks and move around what you can do within the game, and challenge yourself and be rewarded for those challenges, that's important. Because in a game that is at its core just a bunch of people shooting each other, there has to be something, even something as small as an increased time to kill, that gives the game a variation. And in Crysis 3, because you have to think to add that variation, it adds this element of strategy that wouldn't have otherwise been there. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you on my own channel and here on the Company 008 channel. I'll be bringing you Battlefield 3, Crysis 3, Call of Duty, some other games, some other surprises along the way. I might bring you some really high quality series that I put on other channels, but I hope that for now you've enjoyed this video, and I thank you again for watching, and I hope that you'll subscribe to the Company 008 channel, and Culprit's channel, and the other directors here, because they're all beasts and legends, and generally just really nice guys to be around.